Hello and welcome to Higher Ed Live. I am your host, Seth Odell. Higher Ed Live is a live weekly web show all about the world of higher education. We're all about digital development, professional empowerment, and we are coming to you live today from Southern New Hampshire University in rainy Manchester, New Hampshire. Hope you guys are doing well. Heck of a weather day here. As you can see, I'm half in the dark too. I forgot my lighting kit at home, so I'm going to have to ask you guys to bear with me today with this conversation. Please feel free to weigh in, as always, with the hashtag. And let's have a nice open conversation today about a subject that I'm happy to finally be tackling, which is massive open online classes. I'm really excited to get into that, but first, as always, we got to thank the people that help make this show possible. Higher Ed Live is brought to you by Integral, the creators of the Schools app on Facebook, a private Facebook community to boost enrollment and retention. Check out their free white paper on the social side of student retention. That went out with a hashtag just a couple minutes ago. Get on that back channel and check it out. We are also hosted by Omni Update, the leading web content management system CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS OU campus. It's secure, it's scalable, it's got great tools, features, deployment flexibility, and you know what? An awesome user community. Check out a latest report that was sponsored by them on communication expectations of college-bound high school students. In fact, you'll hear it again just in a second in the Weekly 5. And finally, we are sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and even earning points. Check out a recent article from the Chronicle of Higher Ed on how Dartmouth College is utilizing Scavenger for admissions, events, tours, and a whole lot more. Hats off to them. Definitely check that out. So let's dive in now, guys, to the Weekly 5. 5 stories from around the world of higher education that I've been reading, noting, starring, and telling myself I'm going to get back to and take another look at these. Let me know if you guys think you have different ones, but I'm going to dive in with my list right now. Coming up first is Virginia is the latest state to say that if you want to graduate from high school, you're going to need to have at least one online course under your belt to do so. Very interesting trend we're kind of slowly starting to see emerge. So hats off to Virginia, I guess, taking a risk. I think it's a pretty interesting move. Let me know what you guys think. Links going out, as always, to the back channel. So if you haven't caught this article, you can just go on over there, grab that link, and give it a read now, or you know what, maybe sometime down the line. Next up is the story that in the higher ed social circles is getting a lot of buzz. Facebook returning to campus roots with groups for schools. What does that mean exactly? Well, it's kind of still hard to tell. It's closed private Facebook groups for folks with EDU email addresses for your institution. It's rolling out, but it's not exactly everywhere, and it's kind of interesting. So we will see where that goes. I would keep an eye on it, and it's something that's coming up again in my next post for this week, and that's a post over at Integral. Integral obviously weighing in on this. This is something that's very close to them. Groups for Facebook is primarily targeted, well, entirely to folks that already have an EDU email address, so that's your current community as it exists. Integral focuses earlier in the funnel with people that are admitted. It's kind of an interesting thing going on there, so I say check out their post. It's a great conversation. They're on the front lines of that. And next up, the Chronicle of Higher Ed, if you haven't noticed, has started doing a lot more with interesting digital design and data. Here's the latest, which is a whole big redesigned faculty salary survey. Tons of graphics, totally interactive. Chronicle's getting more involved with this. Kind of interesting to see what folks are making and browse around by different institutions. Really easy to do. And finally, the last post I'm pulling up for the Weekly 5 is one from one of our guests today, Audrey Waters over at HackEducation. And it's a post I really liked on the failure of one laptop per child. It hit on with me. I recently was following a lot of controversies coming up around Tom's shoes. Kind of separate industry, but I think it's always interesting when we critically look at companies that are trying to do a good thing, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit, and really critically kind of audit their efforts and see what's happening. This is a great post that did that. It certainly is a warm fuzzy when we think we're helping people in other countries with education technology, but sometimes the devil might be in the details. I'm not sure if it is. I'll let you decide, but it's really important to look into those things and reflect on a deeper level what's going on. And finally, instead of an unsolicited shout-out of the week, I just want to have a little bit of a quick statement. A report came out essentially against the UC Davis regarding that pepper spray incident. You probably saw the photo, the famous one. Well, the report came out and totally condemned the action, called out the chancellor, called out the police. And if you guys remember at Higher Ed Live, I wrote a report that in 2009, this exact incident happened at UCLA, and police were found not to be at fault. And in fact, in the police booklets, which we have linked at Higher Ed Live, it does show that this is appropriate behavior for protesters that are sitting linked arm in arm. So I'll be trying to put a post out on Higher Ed Live, but I just want to say that it's amazing to me that in 2012, we can go after the police for doing an action that in 2009, President Mark Yudof said was completely acceptable. So there's something going on over at UC, and we'll definitely try to keep an eye on what it is and bring the story to you as best we can. So once again, guys, thank you for tuning in for Higher Ed Live. That was the Weekly 5 and the, I guess, unsolicited shout down, not shout out, I guess, whatever you want to call it this week. I want to dive right into today's subject and have a great conversation with our guests. So I'm going to bring on our first guest and welcome back to the program Audrey Waters, ed tech journalist, open source, and open education advocate. Audrey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Happy Thursday to you, Seth.
Yeah, same to you, and thank you for coming onto the program today. And then I'm just going to quickly pull up our other guest, who is Philipp. And Philipp, your last name is Schmidt, is that correct?
Schmidt, that's correct, yes.
And he's the co-founder of P2PU, and if you don't know what that is, you want to, and you're going to learn all about it in just a second, because today's subject that we're talking all about is massive open online classes, and you could call it a trend in education. I think it's more than that, and what I really want to do is have an open conversation about where we're going and what this is and what it means for all of us here. So, Audrey, I'm going to throw the first question out to you. For folks that are uninitiated, what are MOOCs, or massive open online courses, or what are they called? MOOCs? Is that how we call them?
Yes, call it a MOOC. Call it...
Okay, that's a new term for me.
This is something that's getting a lot of play recently, thanks to the courses that Stanford University offered late last year, where they opened up enrollment to the public, really, and allowed anyone to take one of their free online classes. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about massive open online classes. And the massive, in the case of the Stanford, truly was massive. Their artificial intelligence class had over 150,000 people signed up for it. But this is actually something that's been going on for a number of years. It dates back, I would say, to 2008, when the first MOOC was offered by George Siemens and Stephen Downes. And so this is something that isn't new. Well, I mean, this isn't new in the past 6 months in education technology, but this is suddenly I think lots of places are thinking about this, lots of places are experimenting with it, and it's getting a lot of play in the press.
And Phil, let me bring you on. Can you tell us a little bit, Phil, about what P2PU is? So as we get into this conversation further today, folks have a little bit stronger understanding of your background and what you folks offer.
Sure. Well, we're two things. On one hand, we're an online community for people who want to learn with each other, right? So we think that peer learning is a great way to learn, that there are lots of people out there who have knowledge to share and they're willing to share it, and that you don't actually need the expert in front of you to be able to learn something, but you can, take your learning into your own hands. So we are kind of a community of people who believe that is something to spend their time on and learn with each other, and we've got courses on hundreds of different subjects, and we're trying to figure out how to give.
Well, unfortunately, it looks like we got a little bit of a freeze going on with Philipp, so I'm gonna bring Audrey back onto the show out of sheer desperation, I guess. Audrey, so
thanks.
It's halfway through the answer. We're gonna work on it. I guess we'll back up. Technical difficulties, guys. It's Higher Ed Live for a reason. Thanks for bearing with us as always. Hopefully, Philipp will be able to rejoin us in just a second. What Phil was talking about already sounds a little bit different than the MOOCs. I'm already getting the word right. That we're hearing a lot. I mean, is it true that the majority of the headlines we're hearing you're hearing the Stanford humongous open classes, now MITx? I mean, this seems a little bit different than maybe what Philipp is discussing as well. I mean, how many layers are there to this conversation?
Well, I think that this is one of the things that we need to think about, right? Is that the massive part is, when you're scaling to hundreds of thousands of people, sure, that is web scale, but really the idea is that the massive part, I don't think, has to be hundreds of thousands of people. It just is something that's open to the web, right? And that key part, open, I think, is what P2PU is about as well, right? Anyone can participate. You don't have to be enrolled in school.
Yeah. And Phil, welcome back to the show. Glad you were able to get back on. Sorry for the misconnection for a second.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Could you guys hear what I said, or did I drop off right at the beginning?
You dropped off pretty soon into it, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you guys do, and let me do it with the follow-up question too, which is, tell me about who the people are that utilize this service, because we were talking about, obviously, you have your MITs and your Stanfords, and it seems like that's maybe a little bit of a different student body potentially.
Yeah, totally. So I guess what I was going to say is we're a place for peer learning where anyone can come and offer a course and learn with other people. But we are also kind of a lab for, to that wants to figure out what the future of learning is online. Like our starting point is the web. We have lots of people from open source communities, free culture, and they're all interested in kind of figuring out what the future of the university looks like, what the future of learning looks like, but they're not looking at the university as the starting point. And so one of the reasons why we're interested in MOOCs is not only because we engage in online learning, but also because we want to understand how they work. We want to see, we're very interested in the community aspect of learning. We think learning is inherently social. And so we're trying to figure out how MOOCs could be more social. And we're a nonprofit. We are interested in answering questions and then hopefully helping other people do things better. Now, in terms of the audience, I think so let me say a little bit about the audience of MOOCs, because I think that's very interesting and something I've been looking at in the last few weeks and talking to people. And I think primarily right now, the people who are attracted to these MOOCs, the MOOCs are very high standard materials at the moment. They're very sophisticated topics. Artificial intelligence is a course here at MIT that's like a kind of an advanced electronics course, right? You need to have calculus background, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems to attract people that already have degrees in the areas that the courses are held in. And I was speaking to someone earlier today who actually has a PhD in computer science and a master's in maths from Oxford, and he was struggling with the MIT course. And so it's kind of the gentleman scholar, I think, that is attracted to these courses right now. And there's a big question for me in terms of, are we really democratizing education, or are we just helping people who already have access to the best education in the world to kind of get another step ahead of the rest of the crowd?
I gotta say that, and that's a really great point, and one that I couldn't agree with more. It does something that concerns me. The power of this technology is pretty amazing, but if we are just focusing on offering further opportunities in education to those that already have access, certainly that doesn't seem like it's the best utilization of that. So Audrey, let me bring you up too, because this is something we've discussed before as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is this something that is incredibly powerful, but simply catering to those that maybe already have a master's degree or already have really strong educational backgrounds?
I mean, I don't know if it's a matter of just about catering to that particular crowd, but certainly that's who I'm also seeing as taking a lot of these classes. In the case of the Stanford class, sort of anecdotally, much like Philip, I heard a lot of folks who actually worked as data scientists, worked in AI, were taking the machine learning and the artificial intelligence classes. And I'm currently enrolled in Udacity, which is a spin-out of Stanford. I'm enrolled in the Udacity Intro to Computer Science, which is a class on Python. And sure enough, many of the people participating in class are Python. That's their job, is they're Python developers. And so I do think that these classes are, whether or not that's the intention, they certainly are appealing to people that come already with a certain amount of knowledge, and they're working through these classes together. Now that's not to say that actually could be a pretty exciting thing. And if you look back at some of the work, for example, in these early MOOCs as well, they were in some ways people who were experienced in thinking about teaching and learning online, coming together in this massive setting to work through problems together. But is this the right thing for introductory material for folks who are looking for sort of formal and informal education? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Well, and it brings up a really broad question I want to throw out to both of you, and it may or may not even be totally answerable, but then what are the goals for MOOCs? And it may change by institution, but that's a question. Like, what is the goal of this? It's obviously to educate more people, but is there a goal? And I'm asking this both within the institution, but maybe just within the culture here, where people want to democratize education. Is there a goal just to leverage the technology? I mean, can you boil that down at all, or is that just too much of a loaded question? I'll start with you, Philip.
I don't think it's a loaded question at all. And I think there are different answers, and it's kind of difficult to figure out, like, if you listen to the people who are running the MOOCs and the institutions behind them, sometimes the things they say I think there are different motivations, and it's not totally clear. So in the case of MITx, I think a lot of the announcements around it have focused on improving the experience of MIT students on campus. So kind of helping the innovative use of technology that was already happening on campus, kind of amplifying that so that all the MIT students would be able to use those tools. And then the kind of giving everyone else access was almost presented as kind of an externality, right? Like a nice thing that happened as a result of this. In the case of Sebastian Thrun, I think, and Audrey may have a better sense of this, but my impression seems like he's just kind of this guy who's excited by technology. And, you know, he's teaching a course at Stanford and he thinks, well, you know, why not just let other people see what I'm doing here? Like, there's no reason. It's so easy now with this technology to let other people see what I'm doing. I'm not going to pay too much attention to them, but why don't I just share this? And like, it's almost like no extra hassle. And the technology is cool, and let's play with this. And as far as I know, they had no idea what was going to happen. I think that he sent the first email to the AI kind of community and said, you know, there might be 400 or 500 people that sign up for this thing. And then, you know, like 10,000, 50,000. And apparently he had to go to Stanford then and actually negotiate, you know, basically say, well, guys, you know, this little experiment I was going to do that I told you about or didn't tell you about, well, guess what? We have 150,000 people, you know, who are now coming to take the Stanford course. And so I think it's partly that people really just stumbled into this. And now we're trying to explain what's the benefit. I mean, I would certainly hope that we can spin the conversation into the direction that Audrey was going in with kind of, you know, we want to make sure that this actually improves people's lives and gives access to education to people who may not otherwise have this access.
I think that there's, you know, thinking about the way in which these classes operate to the classes that are focused on, you know, the video, sort of, so the Udacity classes are sort of little video vignettes and then quizzes, and then, you know, testing that's, you know, testing at that massive scale is largely automated. And so thinking about what sort of material works well in these settings, I think is also a really interesting question. And, you know, these latest, the ones out of Stanford and MIT, again, not surprisingly, are focused on technology, but sort of what works and what doesn't work in a setting of 160,000 or 100 or 1,000 students. What works well in terms of instruction, in terms of assessment in those kinds of situations too.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I do want to go to one thing that Philipp said, an interesting point. The point about democratizing education and providing access is something that I think that, you know, all of us here on the show right now are incredibly, you know, interested and passionate about. For folks that aren't aware, here at SNHU, we do have a pilot program being developed that we're aiming to do just that, targeting a very different audience. So I want to throw a question out. I'll throw it to you first, Philipp. No, here's my question: is when it comes to democratizing education, this is I'm trying to figure out how I can frame this question, but how do we provide this education to people? And are we looking at it as an alternative to, for instance, a bachelor's degree? I mean, clearly, completion of a degree, only one goal of that is employment or job prospects or anything else. You know, how does a MOOC benefit someone that maybe doesn't have access to education if we can get it to them? Is it just about making them smarter? Is it about helping them demonstrate their education and their knowledge base so they can move on in life? It's kind of the question I'm kind of getting at is, I mean, is this something that competes with traditional degrees for those folks that don't have access to education? Is this complementary? Where do you view that fitting in?
I think right now it's complementary. And the institutions behind it, I think, are nervous about where it could go. It's kind of like the cat's out of the bag. Is that how you say it? Mm-hmm. Whatever the U.S. proverb is, something's out of the bag, and now they don't know what's going to happen. But what gives me a lot of what I think gives me a lot of hope for this is so you know, Southern New Hampshire University. I spent just this Monday with a group in Providence, Rhode Island called College Unbound, and they have a partnership with you guys, and they are actually trying to figure out a way to offer college level education now to people who Hola, Dani.
Sorry about that. I don't know how this is that worked out.
That was cool. So So they basically take people who've fallen out of the system. Like they only in the first year they only accepted people who dropped out of college early in their lives because they couldn't afford it, or because they had to work and they didn't have time and they didn't see the value. And they offer them a totally different college experience. And now they're interested in figuring out. They work with 60 people right now, and they're trying to figure out a way how they could move something like this online, and hopefully we'll be working with them on a writing course. Actually, I haven't told you, Audrey, but you're going to be roped into this, and we're going to build a writing course. And I think that the secret to making this more useful to people is to make the experience more engaging and more practical. So if I come through the MOOC and all I've done is kind of solve little problems that I was kind of already able to solve before, right? Because then it's not valuable. But if I go through a MOOC or a large online course and I connect with other people and I build a network of friends and mentors and people that I can stay in touch with afterwards, and I build something that's meaningful to me in my life, that kind of connects to what I'm interested in, and I get the help that I need through the community of other peer learners, then I think the MOOC can be an experience that actually helps people get ahead in life. And if we can then figure out ways with College Unbound and Southern New Hampshire and some of the more innovative institutions to still give recognition for this, maybe in the beginning it has to be just a certificate, in the future it could lead to a bachelor's degree, then I think we're really onto something. But there are lots of questions about how to do this properly and involve more people that are not answered right now.
Yeah,
I think a lot about. Oh,
please,
go ahead.
No,
Seth.
please go ahead, Audrey. Please.
Well, I think a lot about the way in which knowledge and learning are different now, and they're different partially because we live in this world where there's so much information and things are changing so quickly, and so in some ways that itself demonstrates some of the flaws in the traditional class, which sort of in which the syllabus lists. The 10 weeks of the semester, you've got like the 10 things that you're going to sort of move through thematically. And to me, knowledge and the way in which sort of networks of information operate now, it just seems like a different way to think of, a different potential for us to think about how learning could be different. Because we have to, we're able to sort of offload certain things too onto computers, right? We can look things up on Wikipedia. We don't actually have to sort of store different facts and stuff in our head. So I think, one of the interesting things about MOOCs and when you expand your class this way is that you actually, it isn't just about having thousands of people in a class. It's actually the interesting is sort of like what happens to those thousands of people, and how do they sort of share knowledge and create knowledge in new ways because of the web and because of the size and the creation of these new networks, and that's something I see in certain MOOCs. I would call it like DS 106, right? The digital storytelling class out of University of Mary Washington, that I actually don't see in the classes from Stanford and MIT that are focused again on these sort of gaming, moving through technical skills.
That's a really good point, and it is really interesting to see those differences. I do think it's really interesting that, saying, Philipp, we're very early on too, but there is a pathway here that could make this incredibly powerful. That whether it's a road that goes down, whether it's accreditation directly or not, however it works, as you said, certificates, eventually potentially degrees. How important do you guys think it is cost an issue? And I say this as someone that I track tuition costs very much, and do MOOCs have a potential to radically change the cost barrier for education? I mean, obviously it sounds like a lot of these could potentially be free. If they're accredited, they could be much cheaper. I mean, that to me sounds like one really exciting opportunity too, is that education is getting, it seems less and less accessible on a financial standpoint, and if you can, this is a lot more scalable than one person in a room lecturing to 200 people, it seems.
Audrey, you go first, because I'm going to rant.
Well, I mean, I think that I think that on one hand, what you're asking, Seth, sounds like the logical way to go. But if we're also recognizing that many of the people who are participating in these classes, as they currently are formulated, already have degrees and already have knowledge, I'm not sure if what we're really talking about is, opening up access and democratizing. Maybe we are. I don't know if we're going to see this this piece through necessarily change the way which tuition works. I would hope that it helps change the way in which we think about charging for access to knowledge and access to learning experiences. Okay, rant away, Philip.
Yeah, I've calmed down a little. So, well, my big issue with cost at the moment is that it's like there used to be a time not too far in the past where I think most people felt that education is something that if everyone has access to education, it's good for our societies, our countries, our economies. And so, like, investing in a system that would allow everyone to pursue education was something that was good for everyone, and we should be providing that, right? Public education. And we seem to have shifted, at least in some countries, and the US is like a big is maybe a bigger problem than other countries, but we seem to have shifted to a system where we think that education primarily benefits the individual and not like all of us, and so the individual should pay for it. And it's like, it's kind of it's a much more market-driven system, and I think it's fundamentally wrong, and it's worth kind of trying to step back from this and really interrogating what education does for all of us. It's like, if we want to live in good, healthy societies that are well governed, we need to be educated. And if we pretend that it's an individual problem, we're going to end up with societies that we won't be very happy to live in. Anyway, end of rant. In terms of cost, bringing down cost through MOOCs, so obviously we will have savings in the distribution of educational materials through MOOCs. But I think we can bring down the cost of great education much more if we let more people participate, right? There are lots of people who are willing to share their knowledge, and not just at peer-to-peer university, but there are like dozens, hundreds of examples of learning communities online where people of different ages, different expertise levels are giving their free time to engage with each other, to help each other, to kind of give tips, answer questions, give guidance, act as mentors. And if we stopped kind of drawing this wall around what's education and what's not education, we found ways to accredit and recognize the things that are happening in these communities, then on one hand, I think we'd have much more engaging education. People would be much more excited to learn things because they'd be learning things that they care about, but also it'd be much cheaper. Like there's so much kind of goodwill out there on the web. We can connect people with technology to help each other. We could see huge cost savings and better education if we gave up this idea that there is the ivory tower, and if it's not inside the, so I told you guys, but the other people don't know, I'm sitting in Harvard Law School here. So it's kind of ironic to be here and talk about democratization of education. If we stop pretending that this is the only place where education happens, we'd have cheaper and better education systems, I think.
I think that the connection between tapping in more, this network potential of having this stuff online and connecting to a variety of experts too. It's not just the professor at the front of the class and the 50 or 100 or 200 students that sit in the lecture hall. I mean, it's thinking about the way in which expertise and connections can work. And one of the interesting side effects, I think, of some of the Stanford MOOCs, the Stanford classes, is seeing the bubbling of different forums and community forums and projects that lived outside the sort of the technology and the class that the university itself built and distributed. And thinking about Reddit groups and internet forums that were sort of extracurricular, I guess, and thinking about how can we help support more social learning and learning communities like that, rather than, again, what Philip was saying, just thinking about the classroom, and then once we have online learning, it's somehow that model replicated on the web. And I think that there are other ways to think about the way in which we can sort of bring communities of learners together.
And I totally agree. And who do you guys think are some people that are doing that well? I mean, clearly, Philip, I know you're welcome to plug yourself here. Are there folks doing that are thinking really outside of the box with how that looks and not simply trying to replicate sort of a traditional model online? I mean, just so folks that are watching kind of have an idea if they want to browse online and check some folks out.
Yeah, I can. So I think, we'd love to be a place where that attracts people who are interested in this kind of stuff. So p2pu.org, I'd say, But Mimi Ito, who's actually Joey Ito's sister, and a researcher at the University of California, Irvine, she's interested in mentorship, and so she's starting something called, I'll think of the name, I'll give you the link, but it's, if you Google her name and mentoring or mentorship, I think it should come up. It's the idea that you could find other people that help you learn something, and you kind of build these networks of mentors and mentees. I think College Unbound is a really interesting space to watch. They don't do anything online and open yet, but they want to go in that direction. I think the National Writing Project, for people who are interested in writing, they're an amazing US-based organization with chapters all over the country. And they are just like, they run some courses on P2PU, and so I know them a little bit, and just the level of excitement and openness and willingness to kind of engage with others is amazing, I would say. I don't know, who else, Audrey? DS106, definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, my two would be the National Writing Project as well. I think that it's, because I think that partially it's one of those things that recognizes both the global and the local, the online and the offline, and I think that that's really important for us to think about. But then DS106, you know, I think that it's an interesting way of sort of demonstrating the a learning community that was that this was originally Digital Storytelling 106. This was originally a university class that's now sort of taken on a life of its own, outside the walls of the institution, but still has sort of there still is a class at the university that's working through these projects as well.
The online and offline countermeasures is a really good one too. I think it definitely seems to me that, especially when you talk about democratizing education for folks that maybe don't have the same level of access, having that offline network, whatever it's community groups, community support, somewhere to support them is interesting. Because for that group of people, do they need additional resources? I mean, how can MOOCs personalize support? And that's just a broad question. How can you provide support to someone if they're struggling? I mean, there are things like Open Study which try to scale some levels, tutoring, but you know, how do you do that? How do you provide support to folks? Because with MOOCs, clearly it's, I guess my real question is, how do you avoid a MOOC turning into, on some level, you know, a freshman year lecture hall where it's just still information going out and hope you can keep up? Like, how do you make that a two-way conversation and still scalable? And then maybe that's the loaded question of the day.
Easy question. I'll let Audrey answer. It's such an easy question.
Well, I mean, I think that this is one of the challenges that we have to think about too when we talk about these sorts of informal learning opportunities that really are expecting the people who participate to be motivated self-learners in a lot of ways. And so are we creating now a whole new set of pretty exciting educational opportunities, but for the ones that really only serve a population that already understands and is already pretty well equipped to be motivated and move all the way through a particular course. So what can we do to sort of help create more self-learners? What can we do to sort of help maintain and support people? I think that's a real challenge, and I think that if you look at a lot of these classes that are open, there's a lot of initial excitement about them. You know, hundreds of thousands of people sign up, but then not everybody completes the class. Not everybody follows through. And now a lot of that is sort of, you know, we all lead busy lives. Our schedules are busy. We haven't actually shelled out any money for tuition. So, you know, I think that the stakes are different in that way. But what happens when people do get stuck? What happens when people lose motivation? And are these new courses really designed for a group of learners that we need to actually do a better job creating across the general community? I didn't answer your question at all.
No, I thought it did. Just to build on that, so if you look at the discussion forum, so all of these, most of the MOOCs now, except DS106, which is kind of more engaging and more diverse and more, but the standard MOOC model has a question and answer forum where people can pose questions. They use it kind of as a discussion and community support forum. And if you look at those, like two things kind of struck me. One is that in the discussions in some of the courses goes beyond the materials of the course. So it becomes almost like showing off how much more you know be kind of beyond what's expected, right? So it totally defies the point of bringing more people into this, but it becomes this elite group where, you know, beginners are actually afraid to ask questions. Or the person I spoke to earlier today about the course they're taking at MITx, he said initially there was kind of a good community vibe, but it's turned almost into kind of a homework sharing network where people are sharing hints on how to solve the problems, but they're a little afraid to give the solutions because there's a clearly right and wrong solution. And so there's very little engagement possible. Like, you can't really help each other because you'd be giving away the answer, which is not allowed. So, you know, the way that they're designed almost prevents people from helping each other into the course. And I think a nice experiment would be to recognize certain roles in the community that are connected to, you know, helping beginners come into the community, or answering easy questions, or acting as a mentor, you know, matching people up when they come in. And clearly some people are more advanced and others aren't. And, you know, maybe there should be a feature that matches them up. And then the more advanced person, part of taking the course, you get this for free, you can participate in this. And part of that is you have to give back. And so, you know, maybe you have a mentee and you check in with them once a week, or when they arrive, you say, you know, where are you coming into this course, what level, and you build kind of social relationships between the people in the course that are much stronger, and you appreciate, you reward that kind of behavior, so that the people who want the best grades, or who want to look like they're the strongest in a course, actually start helping other people, and that's the way to stand out, rather than being the smartest in terms of getting the right answer, you know, first.
That definitely seems like a really interesting way to go. I definitely, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to try and motivate people to not just be a learner, but to be an educator, and to teach and learn simultaneously, and to learn from teaching. The question that's in the back channel I want to throw out at you and ask, folks are just asking about assessment. So when it comes to MOOCs, is it always automated? Is this, I mean, I know traditionally, like when we heard with Stanford, a lot of stuff is there a way to put a human touch in? And part of the reason they're asking is, if it's always automated, does that mean MOOCs can never cross over into some of the arts and areas where it's a lot, I mean, where it's not a black and white answer? So how does assessment work currently in the space, and where do you guys see assessment moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think that this is, you know, some of the focus on the Stanford, MITx, and Udacity classes, like I said earlier, because the subject is, because the subject has tended to be around computer science and AI, that does seem to lend itself to the automated grading. DS 106, for example, there's certainly no robot teachers, although I'm wanting to make a Jim Groom joke, but I'm not going to. There's no robot graders on that. So I mean, I think that it's interesting. You know, we have to think about what does assessment look like, and again, if we're thinking about the ways in which the internet and these networks can change the way in which we teach and learn, I mean, I think we have to have a conversation about what assessment looks like. Are these classes about gaining particular knowledge that you're going to then test the student that they can sort of regurgitate back those facts to? Can they demonstrate certain skills, or is this about something that isn't, or are these learning experiences? Do we talk about assessment in a different way?
Yeah, I think assessment is really the most interesting piece, or one of the most interesting pieces in all of this online learning stuff right now. And my personal take on this is, it seems like if you look at technology, we're kind of like, the assessment practices are kind of stuck in 1985, where you would get a computer and then the computer could compute stuff, right? So you design exactly what's right and wrong, and you build this beautiful map. And if someone gets stuck, then there's that voice that says kind of, okay, you know, like your TomTom device, like turn left in 200 meters, turn right in 300 meters. And we just have this perfectly, you know, designed and curated system, and then everyone walks through it, and the computer computes the best way through it. And what I think is amazing about the web, and kind of what happened after, we got over the personal computer, is that the computer was used to connect people, and that's the amazing thing. And I think assessment could scale by connecting people and by aggregating peer review, rather than by trying to compute everything and pretend that we can fit all of human knowledge into these beautiful maps. And so for me, the interesting thing is, we know when we ask people what are the skills or what are the competencies that are really important today, the answers will always be that people are problem solvers, that they're curious, that they can communicate well with to other people, that they can analyze large amounts of information, that they know how to learn and learn new things continuously. And then, so we have this conversation about learning, everyone agrees that's what's important. And then we turn around to assessment, and none of these things are being assessed in any meaningful way. And so it just amazes me that we've got these blinders on. It's like, because we can track certain things, we assess those, and we focus on those, when we really know that they're not the important things. And this guy, Dennis Litke at College Unbound, where it was Monday, he had a bit of a rant about assessment. He said, assessment is like porn. You know, when you look at like problem solving or something, and you look at someone, you know that they have those skills, but it's really difficult to like describe that in any detail. And but the thing is, if we have enough people and the web can connect enough people, then enough people kind of knowing something and knowing that someone has problem solving skills, we aggregate all of that, right? Then we can build scalable assessment systems that actually assess the things we care about that are valuable. And they can outcompete the computer, outcompute the computer.
That is just a really.
I think that's a really interesting thing. But I think that when we talk about when we talk about scaling education, I think that I use that very broadly. We actually are, when they talk about scaling, when they talk about scaling education, they are talking about the technology. And so I think that forgetting scaling the human network and become far more fascinated in building technology to make the assessments more automated, to make the class more automated. Is there a technological solution? And I think that that there is actually interest in sort of automating the things that Chill might we've talked about this before, I think, with the robot essay graders now, and automating essay grading, and the things that we typically wouldn't think of as being able to be tested and scaled this way. People are working on the technology that they think will do so. They're wrong, but whatever.
So when we look towards that kind of a future, I guess I want to throw one of my big last probably closing questions out at you guys in this conversation is, we brought up a lot of interesting conversations. It still clearly feels like MOOCs are very young, even if they have been around for a few years. Realistically, where do both of you see this moving forward, and what kind of trajectory and what kind of timeline? Is this something that we're going to see differences in a few years? Are there major points when it comes to things like if suddenly we're getting accredited, this can be accredited, or things that will kind of launch this off even faster? Where do we see this in the next few years, decade? What will this do to change the model of education that we know of today traditionally? Philip, let's start with you. Let's see if let's start at you, right?
So I think what's going to happen is the first big kind of breaking point will. So first of all, I think we'll see huge attention for the next few MOOCs, and then attention going down. I think there's kind of a spike now. It's going to go down, and it's good that it goes down because the MOOCs aren't as good as they should be. And then people are going to figure out how to make them better, and then it's going to go up again. But I think ultimately we will see millions of people engaging in online learning experiences that are, we could say this is one of the starting points for that future. I think the interesting kind of disruption points will happen when, first of all, when MITx starts issuing certificates that are MIT, that people associate with MIT, even if they're called MITx or and you have 20,000 people, starting to get those certificates, and then both the reaction from MIT, I think, to what they've actually just started doing will be interesting to see when they realize what they're doing, and also the kind of demand for those certificates, because as we kind of talked about earlier, I think the initial group actually doesn't need them. Like that MITx certificate is a nice thing to have, but they already have the MIT degree or the Carnegie Mellon degree, so they've got a job. This is more like a gimmick for them, and then we'll see where this evolves. But I do believe, to some degree, in the disrupting innovation framework, and you will always see people kind of come up with these new models in spaces where they seem like they're not as good as what's out there already, and so it's not competing with the degree. And that's good, because then it can kind of develop there. And I think, I could certainly see this mean major trouble for the kind of middle tier universities, when you can do an entire computer science curriculum at MITx or at Udacity, and you get certificates at the end, and you have all your work online with reviews from other people, and you can point to it. I think Harvard and MIT are never going to have problems attracting students, but there is a whole kind of level of institutions that are going to have major problems attracting students when these massive online programs get better and more accessible, and they issue certificates that people that employers start paying attention to.
I think I agree completely with Philip. I think the certification piece is a big one. I think that when we're seeing things, the move with open badges, Mozilla's open badges project is just one of many indications that I see that there's lots of interest in helping us rethink exactly what are we certifying, what does that look like, and as we shift what matters, what matters isn't necessarily just a college degree. Are there other ways in which we want to recognize learning? Are there other ways in which people can demonstrate knowledge, skills, expertise, connections to other people? I think that there's going to be lots of potential for these sorts of informal or larger than the university learning experiences to really take hold. I think the big lesson from MOOC for all of us should be a great reminder that learning is social, right? And learning now, thanks to the web, should be connected. And I think that how can we sort of use technology to scale the human relationships, and how can we use it to sort of help connect us to other learners around the world? To me, that's interesting potential. That's one of the things I think that hopefully we'll see from the MOOC, is that people learn together, and this isn't just about making sure that thousands of people can watch a university lecture. It's about connecting thousands of people so they can be together.
I absolutely agree, and thank you both for all your thoughts during today's shows. MOOCs is a subject that obviously I'm still just learning how to pronounce the term. It's something that someone like myself who's very interested in education, I do try to read about just disrupting the classroom, disrupting the university, Clayton Christensen style books. I follow this, but it's not something that I was ever terribly in the trenches familiar with, and it's something only recently I've been diving into. So I just want to say thank you to both of you, to Audrey and Philip, for coming on and having this conversation today, because it's having this depth of conversation, at least for someone like myself, that I can really begin to appreciate the power, the magnitude, and the opportunity here. And it's obviously a lot more than just a brief article I might read in the Chronicle about MIT offering something online. I mean, we're talking about really, the opportunity to not only change education, but change people's lives and provide them with opportunity, access, and really make a difference. And I think it's a really cool opportunity. So thank you to both of you for taking the time to join me today and talk about it.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, likewise.
All right, perfect. So folks, thank you guys. This is the end of the road for Higher Ed Live today. As always, each and every episode is archived at higheredlive.com. We're back next week with a very different but interesting conversation, a roundtable discussion on PR in higher ed and social media and the web. It's going to be talking a lot about ownership, internal, how do we brand ourselves, how do we have a conversation online. Interesting stuff. Hope you guys can tune in for that one. Then after that, having another great conversation with Ray Yunko on social media and student success, talking about serious conversation there, utilizing it a lot more than just putting posts out and getting likes, but can we actually utilize these tools to help students succeed and stop like baiting and maybe make a difference. So I hope you guys can keep up with that. As always, his account at higheredlive.com. And until next time, you can catch us on Twitter, on our website, by email, anything else. If you have an idea for a show, let us know. We are here for you. I want to bring you great content each and every week. Thanks for watching.